So today I wanted to talk about the subtle change that Sentinels made to their roster, to the way that they play, which actually made them look really good against a strong 100 Thieves in the first week of America's VCT. The subtle change was more than just putting Pancada onto the Sentinel role. He's a rat-like player. We've already discussed him on Omen when he played and won champions with Loud. But there's a real level of intelligence here that I wanted to highlight with some rounds where Sentinels came back 8-4 down to win on Ascent in that third best of 3 in that series. For round 13, there's not too much discernible stuff here to highlight that's really out there for Sentinels. I just kind of wanted to go over de facto stuff that you'd see from a Killjoy on attack. Typically you would see the turret put towards B. In a fair few rounds we do see it put on top of the box to see if any defenders are actively trying to push up and get that space or try and lurk. But there's a reason why it's put here instead of on the box. First and foremost, the defenders need to push out a little bit further before they're tagged, so it might catch them by surprise. But also, very clearly based off of the default the Sentinels are running, they're going to be going for an A execute. They've smoked mid, they've shown a bit of pressure there, and his main core of players are actually going through mid up to tree and then going for that A execute. Cause a bit more pressure coming in onto the A side because that's where 100 Thieves are trying to push and take these engagements. Here, if we're really watching Pancada, he's not doing all too much, but I do like he's a little bit behind the pack that's pushing in. The Jet and the KO are going to be the first two to really take engagements on these executes, but the Killjoy's just hanging around a little bit to watch to see if anybody's going to try and flank from mid, to see if they're going to come in from tree, just so they can be a bit of a safety net just in case. But Pancada's letting everybody else go in onto the site. He looks at tree to clear it, but also as soon as people start to die on the A site for Sentinels, he's very quick to blend his support, take those aim duels, again checks towards tree, and then shuts the door and plays on the site with the rest of his team. Nothing too amazing there, but that's just the general gist of what you're going to see from typical Killjoy players in the pro scene. For round 14, we do see the turret on the box like I was mentioned before, and this is just a typical B execute. This is a nice little setup because we do see the nanoswarms used to clear various angles over on this B site, but also Pancada does put down the alarm bot just outside of CT. It's a good spot because whether they come in from market, go down the stairs, and then try and get into this spot, they're going to get caught, but of course if they try and come in from CT, it's the same position. But Pancada's watching CT, he's going to be playing and taking those fights if he can, which is obviously a bit risky. But what is really nice here is that you've got Sassy actually watching behind. He sees the Omen smoke come through to cover up the turret so it doesn't go off to watch this flank. But Sassy, because he's there in a visual view, he can see it and he's happy to take those fights up against worse weaponry. Round 15, the setup is effectively the same as the last round, just that B default, a bit more pressure towards mid this time, but I want you to pay attention to Pancada's movement here, especially off the back of Sassy. Again, he's not the first one that's going to be going in to take those entries, and while Sassy's moving a bit further up onto the map, trying to clear a lot of these angles at the same time, he knows the market's clear because that's exactly where Tenz is playing from at this point. He's more focused on stairs, but Pancada's actually moving a little bit to the left, playing from switch and watching CT, and his timing and position for this is perfect. Even though Sassy goes down to the player on stairs, as soon as that initial fight happens, the reaction comes in from Derek to peek from CT, and Pancada's on such an off wide angle, it's an easy fight for him to clear. Another thing that Sentinels overall were doing really well was just how much pressure their utility could cause. We see Zekken put down a recon dart over on the B site, and these two players, the Viper and the Jet, are in positions where they're not being scanned. But we still see Pancada bringing out the nanoswarms, some shock darts as well, because they know that there's a couple of blind spots where this recon dart's not going to hit them, and so they can try and flush out these players. And it does force Asuna to actually try and peek out, take a fight. He gets pinged by the recon, which is a super easy kill for Pancada. The patience, the use of utility, and knowing where 100 Thieves could be playing from and exploiting that is a really nice touch, even though this round doesn't go Sentinels' way. Round 16 is a really nice round to highlight too, for similar reasons to the last one. It's again how Pancada's positioning himself to get as much information as possible. He's playing over towards top mid, and again has that turret over towards B that's still going to catch people if they come out of B main and try and push, but of course because he's on the other side of the map, he doesn't need to be away from the rest of his team that are going to execute on A. So the turret's really nice. They're not afraid to be peeking into mid to see if they can take a fight and if they can see anything. Of course, the KO knife comes out as well to support, so there's some information to work with at least. And whilst the rest of Sentinels execute onto A, Pancada's still watching mid. Actually sees Asuna. I think they take a fight and Asuna tries to run away. But based off of that information and the rest of the information of Sentinels playing on the A site, they know that there's at least a couple of players still playing in tree, which Zekken, based off of that information, uses to hunt his fury and catches another player and flushes the rest of them out. But this is what I like again about Pancada. It's smart play. He's been seen mid, and he knows there's a couple of players in tree. He doesn't use this opportunity to push up mid and try and flank and lurk around. In fact, he does the more straightforward, more common sense idea and just stays with his team. Because the rest of 100 Thieves have seen him in mid already, they might be expecting that flank and might be waiting for it a little bit. So him not really playing into the obvious stuff means that 100 Thieves are going to panic about it, but it's not going to be an issue or a risk at all for Sentinels. For those that are interested in some of the protocols and rules that pro players use that you can also use in your own ranked games, I want to use round 17. This doesn't have much to do with Pancada, but it does highlight a rule that I call the NBS rule pretty well. It's called that because NBS, the coach of Ascend, was the one that told me about it, and also he was the coach of Ascend when they won Champs 2021, so he's a pretty prolific coach and a really good guy to follow. The NBS rule is pretty simple. If you're lurking on an extremity of a map, for example the Omen and the Silver here, what you do depends on what the rest of your team find. Let's say the Sentinels push into mid and see the rest of 100 Thieves. That's your cue as a lurker to start pushing up and trying to take space. The rest of 100 Thieves are going to be focused on taking the fight in mid, and you might be able to sneak up A main, catch a lurk, catch a few people by surprise, and get a good amount of space under the noses of 100 Thieves. However, the other part of the rule is if you're lurking on an extremity and the rest of your team are pushing somewhere and they see absolutely nobody, like Sentinels are seeing here, that's when you need to be careful. Because that means that the rest of 100 Thieves are somewhere else, and more than likely are going to be pushing one of the extremities, which is what they're doing here on A main. This is also something that Sentinels are kind of expecting because it is a low buy for 100 Thieves. So they push into mid, see nobody, and that should be a call for the Silver and Omen of Sentinels to be incredibly careful, and they are exactly that. They use the owl drone, and these players on A have to back out in a mad panic, and that's when the rest of Sentinels that are pushing mid, including Pancada, actually swipe in and get those kills. It's a great way of dealing with ecos, and if you're a player playing on your own, it's a great rule to follow. If your team have found a fight somewhere else on the map, you might be able to lurk and find some space, but if they see nothing, stay where you are and hold tight, because you might be pushed by a good few players. Round 19 shows some more promise for Pancada, but obviously a couple of issues as well whilst he's teaming into this new role. The execute is straightforward enough, it's a 3 versus 4, it's an open B site, and you've still got that turret watching the flank, whilst Pancada also puts an alarm bot on Speedway. Some really nice utility, and also even uses the Killjoy lockdown. This is something that the pro scene has evolved into doing a hell of a lot more recently. It used to be using the Killjoy ultimate to execute onto the B site to take that space for free. Now as you climb to the higher ranks, a lot more teams have been better at using utility to go for an execute, and then using the Killjoy ultimate to buy a bit more time, create a little bit more space to work with, and the way that Pancada's used all of this utility so far is pretty much perfect, but he does go a little bit wrong here. With the turret watching the flank and the alarm bot on Speedway, I think Pancada makes a mistake by trying to play in logs here. The first is that he's going to be that first encounter for 100 Thieves whilst they go for this retake. If he dies, all of that utility that's watching the flank, the alarm bot on Speedway, kind of becomes useless and it's hard for the rest of the team to play. But also, because of that lockdown being used, it means that Pancada can create a lot of space. So it's a position that 100 Thieves are going to expect somebody to try and push up into. If Pancada was just playing from A main, even though he's going to get smoked off by the Omen, he could still play off of this alarm bot and peek out when needed. But most importantly, he can just buy time. Him dying here this early means that he can't really stall 100 Thieves whilst they go for this retake. But if he survives, even if he's not fighting or getting kills, it's going to slow down 100 Thieves on this retake, which could have made a difference, especially added on with that lockdown when it comes to time. But instead he dies, the alarm bot goes down, and it's a pretty easy execute for 100 Thieves to put together. However, literally the round after, in round 20, we see a lot better stuff from Pancada, which shows that he was pretty much born to play this role. This is yet again a position where Sentinels are down a pretty bad way. 3 versus 5, again they have an open B site execute and a lot of space to take here, but this is where Pancada's rat style of play that he was so good on in Omen really starts to show itself up pretty well. The execute comes in onto B, the turret gets put down to just sort of clear some of these angles. He still has his alarm bot ready, and unlike the last round that we just saw, here he's been a lot more patient, waiting on some of these corners, some areas that 100 Thieves need to try and clear. Sentinels are also aware because they don't have the turret watching B main, they need somebody to be watching for the flank, which is what Zekken actually does here pretty well. Pancada does something that you can't really teach. He gets really good timing on just his peak and aggression, and luckily runs into Cryo, who has the op, and it's an easy fight for him to take. After that, the instant turnaround to put the alarm bot in, and this is what I mean, the Killjoy being able to stall these retakes, make it harder, all of this utility that they have to clear, and it means that 100 Thieves have to try and save. Pancada again gets another kill and tries to punish a little bit more. And this is why the change for Sentinels is so much more than just putting Pancada on Killjoy. It's not the straightforward aspect of putting a rat player on a rat role. It's that Pancada has shown that he's one of the most dynamic players, I think, in the scene. He's very good at thinking on his feet, much like Sassy. They both have that League of Legends background where they're incredibly flexible and knowledgeable on how utility can be used. And so playing Sentinels and Killjoy especially gives you so much freedom to do a lot of stuff, to find lurks, to find timings. Speaking of which, this lurk in overtime is so good from Pancada because he hasn't done any of this in the normal attacking rounds. This is the first time that he's tried to push up mid and catch the rotate, which he does so well on Cryo. It's saving those perfect lurks for moments where they're not really expecting it because you've not done it so far. It's the utility that's in straightforward positions. You've got the Killjoy turret watching on B main, for example. You kind of need to do that every single round for the most part. But if you could be adaptable and play around that utility, find good timings, but also be aware enough to go, if I do this, they're going to expect me to do that, so I'm going to do this instead. It's this mind game stuff that Pancada is exceptional at on the Omen, and he's absolutely shining on the Sentinel so far. A couple of issues I've highlighted, some rounds where he just doesn't play in the optimal spot and doesn't really do what he's supposed to be doing, and it wasn't a perfect series from Sentinels. But I think this last half against 100 Thieves, where they went on to win the series, was such a good showing from him and the absolute potential he can have on this role. It's why Nats is such a good player as well. Similar sort of thing. Just normal utility, but how you play around that could be really hard to track and also really fun to watch. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care.